Here again Mushroom differs. The dwarf would have us believe that Rhaenyra ordered her stepmother's tongue torn out at once, rather than merely threatening this. It was only a word from Lady Misery that stayed her hand. The fool insists. The White Worm proposed another, crueler punishment. King Aegon's wife and mother were taken in chains to a certain brothel, and they're sold to any man who wished to have his pleasure of them. The price was high. A golden dragon for Queen Alicent, 3 dragons for Queen Helaena, who was younger and more beautiful. Yet Mushroom says there were many in the city who thought that cheap for carnal knowledge of a queen. Let them remain there until they are with child, Lady Misery is purported to have said. They speak of bastards so freely, let them each have one for their very own. Though the lusts of men and the cruelty of women can never be gainsaid, we put no credence in Mushroom here. That such a tale was told in the wine sinks and pot shops of King's Landing cannot be doubted, but it may be that its provenance was later, when King Aegon II was seeking justification for the cruelty of his own acts. It must be remembered that the dwarf told his stories long years after the events that he related, and might have misremembered. Let us speak no more of the brothel queens, therefore, and return once more to the dragons as they flew to battle. Caraxes and Sheepstealer went north, Vermithor and Silverwing southwest. On the headwaters of the mighty Mander stood Tumbleton, a thriving market town and the seat of House Footley. The castle overlooking the town was stout but small, garrisoned by no more than 40 men, but thousands more had come upriver from Bitterbridge, Longtable, and farther south. The arrival of a strong force of Riverlords swelled their numbers further, and stiffened their resolve. Fresh from their victory at the Butcher's Ball came Sir Garibald Grey and Longleaf the Leonslayer, with the head of Sir Criston Cole upon a spear, Red Rob Rivers and his archers, the last of the Winter Wolves, and a score of landed knights and petty lords whose lands lay along the banks of the Blackwater, amongst them such men of note as Moslander of Yore, Sir Garrick Hall of Middleton, Sir Merrill the Bold, and Lord Owain Borney. All told, the forces gathered under Queen Rhaenyra's banners at Tumbleton numbered near 9,000, according to the truetelling. Other chroniclers make the number as high as 12,000, or as low as 6, but in all these cases, it seems plain that the Queen's men were greatly outnumbered by Lord Hightowers. No doubt the arrival of the dragons Vermithor and Silverwing with their riders was most welcome by the defenders of Tumbleton. Little could they know the horrors that awaited them. The how and when and why of what has become known as the treasons of Tumbleton remain a matter of much dispute, and the truth of all that happened will likely never be known. It does appear that certain of those who flooded into the town, fleeing before Lord Hightower's army, were actually part of that army, sent ahead to infiltrate the ranks of the defenders. Beyond question, 2 of the Blackwater men who had joined the Riverlords on their march south, Lord Owain Borney and Sir Roger Corn, were secret supporters of King Aegon II. Yet their betrayals would have counted for little, had not Sir Ulf White and Sir Hugh Hammer also chosen this moment to change their allegiance. Most of what we know of these men comes from Mushroom. The dwarf is not reticent in his assessment of the low character of these 2 dragon riders, painting the former as a drunkard and the latter as a brute. Both were cravens, he tells us. It was only when they saw Lord Ormond's host with spearpoints glittering in the sun and its line of march stretching back for long leagues that they decided to join him rather than oppose him. Yet neither man had hesitated to face storms of spears and arrows off Driftmark. It may be that it was the thought of attacking Tessarion that gave them pause. In the gullet, all the dragons had been on their own side. This too may be possible, though both Vermithor and Silverwing were older and larger than Prince Darren's dragon, and would therefore have been more likely to prevail in any battle. Others suggest it was avarice, not cowardice, that led White and Hammer to betrayal. Honor meant little and less to them. It was wealth and power they lusted for. After the gullet and the fall of King's Landing, they had been granted knighthood. But they aspired to be lords and scorned the modest holdings bestowed on them by Queen Rhaenyra. When Lords Rosby and Stokeworth were executed, it was proposed that White and Hammer be given their lands and castles through marriage to their daughters, but Her Grace had allowed the traitors' sons to inherit instead. Then Storm's End and Castley Rock were dangled before them, but these rewards as well the ungrateful queen had denied them. No doubt they hoped that King Aegon II might reward them better, should they help return the Iron Throne to him. It might even be that certain promises were made to them in this regard, possibly through Lord Larrys the Clubfoot or one of his agents, though this remains unproven and unprovable. As neither man could read nor write, we shall never know what drove the 2 betrayers, as history has named them, to do what they did. Of the Battle of Tumbleton we know much and more, however. 6,000 of the Queen's men formed up to face Lord Hightower in the field, under the command of Sir Garibald Grey. They fought bravely for a time, but a withering rain of arrows from Lord Ormond's archers thinned their ranks, and a thunderous charge by his heavy horse broke them, sending the survivors running back toward the town walls. There Red Rob Rivers and his bowmen stood, covering the retreat with their own longbows. When most of the survivors were safe inside the gates, Roddy the Ruin and his winter wolves sallied forth from a postern gate, screaming their terrifying northern war cries as they swept around the left flank of the attackers. In the chaos that ensued, the Northmen fought their way through 10 times their own number to where Lord Ormond Hightower sat his warhorse beneath King Aegon's golden dragon and the banners of Aldtown and the Hightower. As the singers tell it, Lord Roderick was bloody from head to heel as he came on, with splintered shield and cracked helm, yet so drunk with battle that he did not even seem to feel his wounds. Sir Brynden Hightower, Lord Ormond's cousin, put himself between the Northmen and his liege, taking off the Ruin's shield arm at the shoulder with one terrible blow of his longachet. Yet the savage Lord of Barrowden fought on, slaying both Sir Brynden and Lord Ormond before he died. Lord Hightower's banners toppled, and the townsfolk gave a great cheer, thinking the tide of battle turned. Even the appearance of Tessarion across the field did not dismay them, for they knew they had 2 dragons of their own. But when Vermithor and Silverwing climbed into the sky and loosed their fires upon Tumbleton, those cheers changed to screams. It was the field of fire writ small, Grand Maester Muncan wrote. Tumbleton went up in flame. Shops, homes, septs, people, all. Men fell burning from gatehouse and battlements, or stumbled shrieking through the streets like so many living torches. Outside the walls, Prince Darren swooped down upon Tessarion. Pate of Longleaf was unhorsed and trampled, Sir Garibald Grey pierced by a crossbow bolt, then engulfed by dragonflame. The 2 betrayers scourged the town with whips of flame from one end to the other. Sir Roger Corn and his men chose that moment to show their true colors, cutting down defenders on the town gates and throwing them open to the attackers. Lord Owain Borney did the same within the castle, driving a spear through the back of Sir Merrill the Bold. The sack that followed was as savage as any in the history of Westeros. Tumbleton, that prosperous market town, was reduced to ash and embers. Thousands burned, and as many died by drowning as they tried to swim the river. Some would later say they were the fortunate ones, for no mercy was shown the survivors. Lord Footley's men threw down their swords and yielded, only to be bound and beheaded. Such townswomen as survived the fires were raped repeatedly, even girls as young as 8 and 10. Old men and boys were put to the sword, whilst the dragons fed upon the twisted, smoking carcasses of their victims. Tumbleton was never to recover. Though later Footleys would attempt to rebuild atop the ruins, their new town would never be a tenth the size of the old, for the small folk said the very ground was haunted. 160 leagues to the north, other dragons soared above the Trident, where Prince Daemon Targaryen and the small brown girl called Nettles were hunting Aemon One-Eye without success. They had based themselves at Maidenpool, at the invitation of Lord Manfred Moodin, who lived in terror of Vhagar descending on his town. Instead Prince Aemon struck at Stonyhead, in the foothills of the Mountains of the Moon, at Sweetwillow on the Green Fork and Sallydance on the Red Fork. He reduced Bowshot Bridge to embers, burned Old Ferry and Crone's Mill, destroyed the mother house at Beckester, always vanishing back into the sky before the hunters could arrive. Vhagar never lingered, nor did the survivors oft agree on which way the dragon had flown. Each dawn Caraxes and Sheepstealer flew from Maidenpool, climbing high above the riverlands in ever-widening circles in hopes of espying Vhagar below, only to return defeated at dusk. The chronicles of Maidenpool tell us Lord Moodin made so bold as to suggest that the dragon riders divide their search, so as to cover twice the ground. Prince Daemon refused. Vhagar was the last of the 3 dragons that had come to Westeros with Aegon the Conqueror and his sisters, he reminded his lordship. Though slower than she had been a century before, she had grown nigh as large as the Black Dread of old. Her fires burned hot enough to melt stone, and neither Caraxes nor Sheepstealer could match her ferocity. Only together could they hope to withstand her. And so he kept the girl Nettles by his side, day and night, in sky and castle. Yet was fear of Vhagar the only reason Prince Daemon kept Nettles close to him. Mushroom would have us believe it was not. By the dwarf's account, Daemon Targaryen had come to love the small brown bastard girl, and had taken her into his bed. How much credence can we give the fool's testimony? Nettles was no more than 10 and 7, Prince Daemon 9 and 40, yet the power young maidens exert over older men is well known. Daemon Targaryen was not a faithful consort to the queen, we know. Even our normally reticent Septon Eustace writes of his nightly visits to Lady Mysaria, whose bed he oft shared whilst at court, with the queen's blessing, purportedly. Nor should it be forgotten that during his youth, every brothel keeper in King's Landing knew that Lord Fleabottom took an especial delight in maidens, and kept aside the youngest, prettiest, and more innocent of their new girls for him to deflower. The girl Nettles was young, beyond a doubt, though perhaps not as young as those the prince had debauched in his youth, but it seems doubtful that she was a true maiden. Growing up homeless, motherless, and penniless on the streets of Spicedown and Hull, she would most likely have surrendered her innocence not long after her first flowering, if not before, in return for half a groat or a crust of bread. And the sheep she fed to sheepstealer to bind him to her. How would she have come by those, if not by lifting her skirts for some shepherd? Nor could Nettie truly be called pretty. A skinny brown girl on a skinny brown dragon, writes Monken in his true telling, though he never saw her. Septon Eustace says her teeth were crooked, her nose scarred where it had once been slit for thieving. Hardly a likely paramour for a prince, one would think. Against that we have the testimony of Mushroom. And in this case, the Chronicles of Maidenpool is set down by Lord Mouton's maester. Maester Norrin writes that the prince and his bastard girl supped together every night, broke their fast together every morning, slept in adjoining bedchambers, that the prince doted upon the brown girl as a man might dote upon his daughter, instructing her in common courtesies, and how to dress and sit and brush her hair, that he made gifts to her of an ivory-handled hairbrush, a silvered looking glass, a cloak of rich brown velvet bordered in satin, a pair of riding boots of leather soft as butter. The prince taught the girl to wash, Norrin says, and the maidservants who fetched their bath water said he oft shared a tub with her, soaping her back or washing the dragon stink from her hair, both of them as naked as their namedays. None of this constitutes proof that Daemon Targaryen had carnal knowledge of the bastard girl, but in light of what followed we must surely judge that more likely than most of Mushroom's tales. Yet however these dragon riders spent their nights, it is a certainty that their days were spent prowling the skies, hunting after Prince Aemond and Vhagar without success. So let us leave them for the nonce, and turn our gaze briefly across Blackwater Bay. It was about this time that a battered merchant cog named Nysaria came limping into the harbor beneath Dragonstone to make repairs and take on provisions. She had been returning from Pentos to Old Volantis when a storm drove her off course, her crew said. But to this common song of peril at sea, the Volantans added a queer note. As Nysaria beat westward, the Dragonmont loomed up before them, huge against the setting sun. And the sailors spied two dragons fighting, their roars echoing off the sheer black cliffs of the smoking mountain's eastern flanks. In every tavern, inn, and whorehouse along the waterfront the tale was told, retold, and embroidered, till every man on Dragonstone had heard it. Dragons were a wonder to the men of Old Volantis, the sight of two in battle was one the men of Nysaria would never forget. Those born and bred on Dragonstone had grown up with such beasts. Yet even so, the sailor's story excited interest. The next morning some local fisherfolk took their boats around the Dragonmont and returned to report seeing the burned and broken remains of a dead dragon at the mountain's base. From the color of its wings and scales, the carcass was that of grey ghost. The dragon lay in two pieces, and had been torn apart and partially devoured. On hearing this news Sir Robert Quince, the amiable and famously obese knight whom the Queen had named Castellan of Dragonstone upon her departure, was quick to name the cannibal as the killer. Most agreed, for the cannibal had been known to attack smaller dragons in the past, though seldom so savagely. Some amongst the fisherfolk, fearing that the killer might turn upon them next, urged Quince to dispatch knights to the beast's lair to put an end to him, but the Castellan refused. If we do not trouble him, the cannibal will not trouble us, he declared. To be certain of that, he forbade fishing in the waters beneath the Dragonmont's eastern face, where the vanquished dragon's body lay rotting. His decree did not satisfy his restless charge, Baela Targaryen, Prince Daemon's daughter by his first wife, Laena Velaryon. At 10 and 4, Baela was a wild and willful young maiden, more boyish than ladylike, and very much her father's daughter. Though slim and short of stature, she knew not of fear, and lived to dance and hawk and ride. As a younger girl she had oft been chastised for wrestling with squires in the yard, but of late she had taken to playing kissing games with them instead. Not long after the Queen's court removed to King's Landing, whilst leaving Lady Baela on Dragonstone, Baela had been caught allowing a kitchen scullion to slip his hand inside her jerkin. Sir Robert, outraged, had sent the boy to the block to have the offending hand removed. Only the girl's tearful intercession had saved him. She is overly fond of boys, the Castellan wrote Baela's father, Prince Demon, after that incident, and should be married soon, lest she surrender her virtue to someone unworthy of her. Even more than boys, however, Lady Baela loved to fly. Since first riding her dragon Moondancer into the sky not half a year past, she had flown every day, ranging freely to every part of Dragonstone and even across the sea to Driftmark. Always eager for adventure, the girl now proposed to find the truth of what had happened on the other side of the mountain for herself. She had no fear of the cannibal, she told Sir Robert. Moondancer was younger and faster, she could easily outfly the other dragon. But the Castellan forbade her taking any such risk. The garrison was given strict instructions. Lady Baela was not to leave the castle. When caught attempting to defy his command that very night, the angry maiden was confined to her chambers. Though understandable, this proved in hindsight to be unfortunate, for had Lady Baela been allowed to fly she might have spied the fishing boat that was even then making its way around the island. Aboard was an aged fisherman called Tom Tanglebeard, his son Tom Tangletong, and two cousins, from Driftmark, left homeless when Spicetown was destroyed. The younger Tom, as handy with a tankard as he was clumsy with a net, had spent a deal of time buying drinks for Volanton sailors and listening to their accounts of the dragons they had seen fighting. Grey and gold they was, flashing in the sun, one man said. And now, in defiance of Sir Robert's prohibition, the two Toms were intent on delivering their cousins to the stony strand where the dead dragon sprawled burned and broken, so they might seek after his slayer. Meanwhile, on the western shore of Blackwater Bay, word of battle and betrayal at Tumbleton had reached King's Landing. It is said the Dowager Queen Alicent laughed when she heard. All they have sowed, now shall they reap, she promised. On the Iron Throne, Queen Rhaenyra grew pale and faint, and ordered the city gates closed and barred. Henceforth, no one was to be allowed to enter or leave King's Landing. I will have no turncloaks stealing into my city to open my gates to rebels, she proclaimed. Lord Ormond's host could be outside their walls by the morrow or the day after. The betrayers, dragon-born, could arrive even sooner than that. This prospect excited Prince Joffrey. Let them come, the boy announced, flush with the arrogance of youth and eager to avenge his fallen brothers. I will meet them on Tyraxes. Such talk alarmed his mother. You will not, she declared. You are too young for battle. Even so, she allowed the boy to remain as the Black Council discussed how best to deal with the approaching foe. 6 dragons remained in King's Landing, but only one within the walls of the Red Keep. The Queen's own she-dragon, Syrax. A stable in the outer ward had been emptied of horses and given over for her use. Heavy chains bound her to the ground. Though long enough to allow her to move from stable to yard, the chains kept her from flying off riderless. Syrax had long grown accustomed to chains. Exceedingly well fed, she had not hunted for years. The other dragons were kept in the dragon pit. Beneath its great dome, 40 huge undervaults had been carved from the bones of the hill of Rhaenys in a great ring. Thick iron doors closed these man-made caves at either end, the inner doors fronting on the sands of the pit, the outer opening to the hillside. Caraxes, Vermithor, Silverwing, and Sheepstealer had made their lairs there before flying off to battle. 5 dragons remained. Prince Joffrey's Tyraxes, Adam Valerion's pale grey Seasmoke, the young dragons Morgul and Shrykos, bound to Princess Jaehaera, fled, and her twin, Prince Jacaery's dead, and Dreamfire, beloved of Queen Helena. It had long been the custom for at least one dragon rider to reside at the pit, so as to be able to rise to the defense of the city should the need arise. As Rhaenyra preferred to keep her sons by her side, that duty fell to Adam Valerion. But now voices on the Black Council were raised to question Sir Adam's loyalty. The Dragonseeds Ulf White and Hugh Hammer had gone over to the enemy. But were they the only traitors in their midst? What of Adam of Hull and the girl Nettles? They had been born of bastard stock as well. Could they be trusted? Lord Bartimos Celtigar thought not. Bastards are treacherous by nature, he said. It is in their blood. Betrayal comes as easily to a bastard as loyalty to trueborn men. He urged Her Grace to have the 2 baseborn dragon riders seized immediately, before they too could join the enemy with their dragons. Others echoed his views, amongst them Sir Luther Largent, commander of her city watch, and Sir Laurent Marbrand, Lord Commander of her Queensguard. Even the two White Harbor men, that fearsome knight Sir Medric Manderley and his clever, corpulent brother Sir Torren, urged the Queen to mistrust. Best take no chances, Sir Torren said. If the foe gains 2 more dragons, we are lost. Only Lord Corlys and Grand Maester Gerardes spoke in defense of the Dragonseeds. The Grand Maester said that they had no proof of any disloyalty on the parts of Nettles and Sir Adam. The path of wisdom was to seek such proof before making any judgments. Lord Corlys went much further, declaring that Sir Adam and his brother, Alan, were true Valerians, worthy heirs to Driftmark. As for the girl, though she might be dirty and ill-favored, she had fought valiantly in the Battle of the Gullet. As did the 2 betrayers, Lord Celtigar countered. The hand's impassioned protests and the Grand Maester's cool caution both proved to be in vain. The Queen's suspicions had been aroused. Her Grace had been betrayed so often, by so many, that she was quick to believe the worst of any man, Septon Eustace writes. Treachery no longer had the power to surprise her. She had come to expect it, even from those she loved the most. It might be so. Yet Queen Rhaenyra did not act at once, but rather sent for Mysaria, the harlot and dancing girl who was her mistress of whisperers in all but name. With her skin as pale as milk, Lady Misery appeared before the council in a hooded robe of black velvet lined with blood-red silk, and stood with head bowed humbly as her Grace asked whether she thought Sir Adam and Nettles might be planning to betray them. Then, the White Worm raised her eyes and said in a soft voice, "The girl has already betrayed you, my queen. Even now she shares your husband's bed, and soon enough she will have his bastard in her belly." Then Queen Rhaenyra grew most wroth, Septon Eustace writes. In a voice as cold as ice, she commanded Sir Luther Largent to take 20 gold cloaks to the dragon pit and arrest Sir Adam Valerian. Question him sharply, and we will learn if he is true or false, beyond a doubt. As to the girl Nettles, she is a common thing, with the stink of sorcery upon her, the Queen declared. My prince would ne'er lay with such a low creature. You need only look at her to know she has no drop of dragon's blood in her. It was with spells that she bound a dragon to her, and she has done the same with my lord husband. So long as he was in the girl's thrall, Prince Demon could not be relied upon, her Grace went on. Therefore, let a command be sent at once to Maidenpool, but only for the eyes of Lord Moudon. Let him take her at table or abed and strike her head off. Only then shall my prince be freed. And thus did betrayal beget more betrayal, to the Queen's undoing. As Sir Luther Largent and his gold cloaks rode up Rhaenys' hill with the Queen's warrant, the doors of the dragon pit were thrown open above them, and Seasmoke spread his pale grey wings and took flight, smoke rising from his nostrils. Sir Adam Valerian had been forewarned in time to make his escape. Balked and angry, Sir Luther returned at once to the Red Keep, where he burst into the Tower of the Hand and laid rough hands on the aged Lord Corlys, accusing him of treachery. Nor did the old man deny it. Bound and beaten, but still silent, he was taken down into the dungeons and thrown into a black cell to await trial and execution. The Queen's suspicion fell upon Grand Maester Gerardes as well, for like the sea snake he had defended the Dragonseeds. Gerardes denied having any part in Lord Corlys's betrayal. Mindful of his long leal service to her, Rhaenyra spared the Grand Maester the dungeons, but chose instead to dismiss him from her council and send him back to Dragonstone at once. I do not think you would lie to my face, she told Gerardes, but I cannot have men around me that I do not trust implicitly, and when I look at you now all I can recall is how you prated at me about the Nettles girl.